The moment my mother screamed, "How did you find out?" was the moment they realized their lies were over. I didn't just expose them. I destroyed everything they built on my back. But you want to know the real kicker? They had been planning this betrayal for over 2 years. 2 years of looking me in the eye, hugging me, calling me their hero, while they were slowly, methodically destroying my life behind my back. And the worst part? I almost let them get away with it. But the real story started months earlier, when my family did something I never imagined. Something so calculated, so cruel that even now, months later, I still wake up in cold sweats thinking about how close they came to ruining everything I had worked for. This isn't just a story about betrayal. This is about how the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally can become your worst enemies, and how sometimes revenge isn't just justified, it's necessary. Let me paint you a picture of who I used to be. I was the golden child, the success story, the one everyone in my family bragged about to their friends. "Oh, you should meet my daughter," my mom would say. "She's doing so well for herself." And I was. I had worked my ass off to get where I was, putting myself through college while working 2 jobs, graduating with honors, landing a decent job in finance, and slowly building a life I was proud of. But here's the thing about being the successful one in a struggling family: you become the ATM. And I didn't mind, not at first. When my younger brother needed money for his car repair, I sent it. When my mom couldn't make rent, I covered it. When my dad's medical bills started piling up, I took care of them. When my aunt needed help with her kids' school fees, I was there. I was always there. I was the one they called when bills were due, when rent was late, when someone needed saving. I didn't mind. They were my family, and family takes care of each other, right? That's what I believed. That's what they taught me. "Blood is thicker than water," my grandmother used to say. "Family first. Always family first." So I gave, and I gave, and I gave some more. For 3 years, I was their safety net, their emergency fund, their miracle solution to every financial crisis. I estimated I sent them over $40,000 during those 3 years. $40,000 of my hard-earned money. Money I could have used to buy my own house, to take vacations, to build my own future, but I told myself it was an investment in the people I loved. I remember one particular night. I had just gotten home from a 14-hour workday. I was exhausted, barely keeping my eyes open, when my phone rang. It was my mom, crying. "Honey, I know it's late, but we're going to lose the house. The bank called today and we're 3 months behind on payments." I didn't want to ask, but... Before she even finished the sentence, I was already opening my banking app. "How much do you need, Mom?" $8,000, she whispered. "I know it's a lot, but..." "I'll send it tonight," I said, even though $8,000 was nearly half my savings at the time. "Don't worry about it. Family takes care of family." The relief in her voice was worth it. I thought, "You're an angel, sweetheart. I don't know what we'd do without you. You're saving us." Those words felt like a warm hug. I was saving them. I was the hero of my family's story. And damn, it felt good to be needed, to be important, to be the solution to everyone's problems. But looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. The conversations that would stop when I walked into the room, the way they'd exchange glances when they thought I wasn't looking, the fact that despite all the money I was sending, they never seemed to be getting ahead. There was always another crisis, another emergency, another reason why they needed more money. I should have questioned why my brother, who was supposedly using my money to fix his car and find a job, was posting pictures on social media of expensive dinners and new clothes. I should have wondered why my mom, who claimed to be struggling to pay bills, had suddenly gotten her nails done professionally and was talking about redecorating the living room. But I didn't question it because I trusted them. Because when you love someone, you want to believe the best in them. Because I thought that being generous and giving made me a good person, a good daughter, a good sister. I thought I was building stronger relationships with my family through my generosity. God, I was so naive. The shift started subtly. It wasn't dramatic at first, just small changes that I initially brushed off as coincidence or bad timing. Phone calls that used to happen every few days started becoming weekly, then every few weeks. When I'd call them, they seemed distracted, always rushing to get off the phone. "Sorry, honey. I'm in the middle of something," became my mom's standard response. Text messages would go unanswered for days, not just from one person, but from all of them. It was like they had collectively decided that I wasn't worth their immediate attention anymore. And here's the thing that really hurt. They were active on social media. I could see them posting, commenting on other people's stuff, living their lives. They just weren't including me in those lives anymore. The moment I stopped sending money, they stopped calling. Completely. And I mean completely. It wasn't gradual. It was like someone had flipped a switch. For 2 weeks straight, my phone was silent. No good morning texts from Mom. No memes from my brother. No random calls from my aunt asking about my day. Nothing. At first I thought maybe something was wrong. Maybe there was a family emergency I didn't know about. So I called my mom, straight to voicemail. I called my brother. Voicemail. I tried my aunt, my cousin, even my dad. Every single call went to voicemail, and not one of them called me back. I started to panic. Were they okay? Had something terrible happened? I even drove to my parents' house one evening, my heart racing with worry. But when I pulled into the driveway, all the lights were on, and I could see movement inside. They were home. They were fine. They just weren't answering my calls. I knocked on the door, and the silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the TV inside, could hear voices, but nobody came to the door. I stood there for 10 minutes, knocking periodically, calling out, "Mom? Dad? It's me." Nothing. They were ignoring me. In my childhood home, standing on the porch where I'd played as a kid, they were pretending I didn't exist. The humiliation was crushing. I sat in my car outside their house and cried. These were the people who had raised me, who had told me they loved me, who had called me their angel just weeks before. And now they couldn't even be bothered to open the door. But then, 3 days later, my phone rang. It was my mom, and for a moment, I felt this surge of relief. Finally, they were reaching out. Maybe there had been a misunderstanding. Maybe they'd been going through something and just needed space. "Hi, sweetheart," my mom said, and her voice sounded different. Fake cheerful, like she was reading from a script. "How are you doing?" "Mom, I've been trying to reach you for weeks. I was worried something had happened." "Oh, we've just been so busy," she interrupted. "Listen, honey, I hate to ask, but we have a situation. Your brother's car broke down again and he needs it to get to work. Could you help us out? Just $1,500 this time." There it was. The only reason they were calling me. Money. Not because they missed me. Not because they wanted to know how I was doing. Not because they cared about my life. They needed money. So suddenly I existed again. The silence that followed my no was telling. I had never said no to them before, and clearly they hadn't prepared for that possibility. "What do you mean, no?" my mom asked, and I could hear the confusion in her voice. "I mean, no, Mom. I'm not sending money this time. I've been trying to reach all of you for weeks, and the only time I hear from you is when you need something." That doesn't feel good. Another long silence. Then, in a voice I'd never heard my mother use before, cold, almost hostile, she said, "Well, I guess we know where we stand with you now, don't we?" And she hung up. My own mother hung up on me because I wouldn't send money. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong with this family dynamic I had been funding for years. The isolation that followed was systematic and cruel. It wasn't just that they stopped calling. It was like they had erased me from their lives entirely. I found out later that they were still having family gatherings, still hanging out, still supporting each other. They just weren't including me. One morning, I woke up to find myself removed from the family WhatsApp group. No explanation, just gone. The group where we shared photos, made plans, celebrated birthdays, shared news. I was just deleted like I had never been part of the family at all. But here's what really twisted the knife. I found out from a mutual friend that my cousin had gotten married. My cousin, who I had helped pay for her wedding dress just 6 months earlier, had gotten married and didn't even tell me. There were photos all over social media, my entire family dressed up, celebrating, dancing, laughing. Everyone was there, everyone except me. When I called my aunt to ask about it, she was short and dismissive. "It was a small ceremony," she said. "Just immediate family." "I am immediate family," I replied, my voice breaking. "Are you?" she asked. "Because lately it doesn't feel like you care about any of us unless it's convenient for you." The gaslighting was masterful. Suddenly, I was the bad guy. I was the one who didn't care about family. I was the one who was selfish and distant. They had flipped the entire narrative, and somehow my refusal to continue being their personal ATM made me the villain in their story. I started questioning myself. Maybe I had been too focused on work. Maybe I hadn't been as present as I should have been. Maybe they were right, and I was a terrible family member who only showed love through money. The self-doubt was eating me alive. But then I remembered all the times I had dropped everything to help them, all the late-night calls I had answered, all the emergencies I had solved, all the sacrifices I had made. I hadn't been perfect, but I had been there for them in every way that mattered. Or so I thought. The final blow came when I found out about my brother's birthday party. Not from him, not from my parents, but from a post he made on social media thanking everyone who came to celebrate with him. The same brother whose car repairs I had funded for 2 years, whose rent I had covered multiple times, whose life I had helped stabilize. He had celebrated his birthday without even telling me it was happening. In the photos, I could see my parents laughing, my aunts and uncles raising toasts, cousins I had helped through tough times all gathered around him. The same people who had called me family, who had told me they loved me, who had said I was essential to their lives. They were all there, celebrating without me, like I had never existed. But what hurt the most was seeing how happy they looked. They weren't missing me at all. If anything, they looked relieved, like a burden had been lifted from their shoulders. I realized that for years, while I thought I was building relationships with them, they had seen me as nothing more than a source of income. And now that the money had stopped flowing, they were perfectly content to continue their lives without me. I cried for hours that night. Not just because they had excluded me, but because I finally understood that everything I had believed about my family, about our relationships, about the love I thought we shared, it had all been conditional. Conditional on my ability to solve their problems and fund their lives. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had been treating me like a business transaction for years, and when the transaction stopped benefiting them, they had simply moved on to other sources of income. I wasn't their daughter, their sister, their niece. I was their backup plan, and now that I wasn't available anymore, they had discarded me like a used tissue. For weeks, I tried to make sense of what had happened. I oscillated between anger and depression, between wanting revenge and wanting to just disappear. I had been completely cut off from the people I thought were my closest support system, and the isolation was devastating. But then something strange started happening. I began receiving mail that didn't make sense. Credit card applications I had never filled out, loan approval letters for amounts I had never requested. At first, I thought it was just junk mail or some kind of mistake, but when I started paying closer attention, I noticed that all of these applications and approvals had my correct full name, my social security number, and an address I didn't recognize. When I checked my email, I found a loan approval in my name. I never applied for anything. The email was congratulating me on my approved personal loan of $12,000, and it listed a payment schedule that would have me paying nearly $20,000 over the next 3 years. But I had never applied for this loan. I had never even heard of the lending company. My hands were shaking as I called the bank. "I'm calling about a loan that was apparently approved in my name," I told the customer service representative. "But I never applied for any loan." "Let me look that up for you," she said. After a few minutes, she came back on the line. "I see the application here. It was submitted 3 weeks ago with all of your information, including your social security number, employment details, and salary information." The application was approved and the funds were already dispersed to the account holder. "What account?" I asked, my heart pounding. She gave me a routing number and account number that I didn't recognize. "The account is listed under the name of Susan Martinez," she said. Susan Martinez, my mother's name. The room started spinning. My family had used my identity. They had taken out a loan in my name and had the money sent to my mother's account. Without my knowledge, without my consent, they had committed identity theft against their own daughter. But this was just the beginning of what I discovered. I spent the next week doing detective work, and what I found made me physically ill. This wasn't just one loan. Over the past 8 months, starting right around the time I had begun questioning their constant requests for money, they had systematically used my identity to secure multiple forms of credit. There were 3 different personal loans totaling nearly $30,000. 2 credit cards with a combined limit of $15,000, both maxed out. A car loan for $18,000 for a vehicle I had never seen. Even a mortgage application that had been submitted but thankfully denied due to insufficient income verification. All of this was in my name. All of this was my legal responsibility. All of this was destroying my credit score and putting me on the hook for over $60,000 in debt I had never agreed to take on. The worst part was how sophisticated their operation had been. They had my social security number, obviously, because I was their daughter and had shared it with them over the years for various legitimate reasons. But they also had detailed information about my employment, my salary, my banking information. Information I had given them because I trusted them, because they were my family. I found email accounts they had created using slight variations of my name. I found fake phone numbers they had set up to receive verification calls. I found copies of documents with forged signatures that looked remarkably similar to my real signature. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision to take out one loan. This was a calculated long-term plan to use my identity as their personal line of credit. When I called the car dealership about the auto loan, they told me that I had come in with my mother to co-sign the loan, and my mother had done most of the talking. "Your mom seemed so proud of you for helping your brother get his first decent car," the salesperson told me. "She kept saying what a generous daughter you were." My mother had been there. She had watched someone forge my signature on loan documents. She had played the role of the proud mother while they stole my identity and my financial future. The betrayal was so deep, so calculated, that I couldn't even process it emotionally. It felt like finding out that your entire life had been a lie. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I wanted them to think I was powerless, that I had just accepted being cut out of the family and moved on with my life. I wanted them to feel secure in their deception, confident that they had gotten away with it. But inside, I was methodically building my case. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in identity theft and fraud cases. I filed police reports for each fraudulent account. I reached out to every lender and creditor to dispute the charges and provide evidence that the accounts had been opened without my knowledge or consent. The lawyer told me that because the perpetrators were family members who had access to my personal information, it would be more difficult to prove fraud, but not impossible. "The key," he said, "is documentation. We need to show a pattern of deception and establish that you had no knowledge of these accounts." So I started documenting everything. I saved every email, every letter, every phone call recording where it was legal to do so. I created a timeline of when each fraudulent account was opened and cross-referenced it with the timeline of when my family had started distancing themselves from me. The correlation was clear. As they realized I was becoming less willing to give them money freely, they had started taking it without permission. I also hired a private investigator to help me understand the full scope of what they had done. I needed to know if there were other accounts, other loans, other schemes I hadn't discovered yet. The investigator found 2 additional credit cards and 1 more personal loan. In total, they had stolen my identity to secure over $75,000 in credit. $75,000, more money than I had ever given them willingly, and money that would have destroyed my financial future if I hadn't discovered it in time. The private investigator also discovered something else interesting. My brother had purchased a brand new car, not the used car that the loan was supposedly for. He was driving around in a $30,000 vehicle while I was dealing with the legal and financial consequences of the loan that had paid for it. My mother had also made some interesting purchases around the time the loans were approved. A new bedroom set, a vacation to Florida, expensive jewelry that she had been showing off on social media, money that should have been used to pay their bills, the bills they had claimed they couldn't afford, was being spent on luxuries while my credit score plummeted. I spent 3 months building my case, and during that time, I had 0 contact with my family. They seemed perfectly content with this arrangement, continuing to post on social media about their happy family gatherings and good times, never once mentioning that they were missing a daughter, sister, or niece. But I was watching, I was documenting, and I was planning. The hardest part was keeping my anger in check. Every day I discovered new evidence of their betrayal, and every day I wanted to call them and scream at them, to demand answers, to make them face what they had done. But my lawyer advised patience. If you confront them now, they'll have time to cover their tracks, to come up with explanations, to prepare their defense. The element of surprise is your biggest advantage. So I waited, and I planned. And I prepared for the moment when I would destroy everything they had built on the foundation of my stolen identity and broken trust. I decided that I wouldn't just handle this quietly through lawyers and police reports. They had humiliated me, isolated me, and stolen from me, but they had done it all behind closed doors, maintaining their image as loving family members while treating me like garbage in private. I wanted their entire extended family to know what kind of people they really were. I wanted their friends, their neighbors, their co-workers to understand that the generous, loving family image they projected was built on lies and theft. I wanted them to face the same kind of public humiliation and isolation they had subjected me to. My cousin's engagement party was coming up. The same cousin who had gotten married without telling me, who had been part of my systematic exclusion from family events. According to social media, it was going to be a big celebration with the entire extended family. Aunts, uncles, grandparents, family friends, everyone I had grown up with. Perfect. The night of the engagement party, I drove to my cousin's house with a folder full of documents, a recording device, and a heart full of righteous anger. I had spent months preparing for this moment, and I was ready to burn their entire facade to the ground. I walked up to the front door in my best dress, carrying a gift bag like any normal family member would, and knocked. When my aunt answered the door, the shock on her face was priceless. She clearly hadn't expected to see me. "Oh," she said, obviously flustered. "You're here." "Of course I'm here," I said with a sweet smile. I wouldn't miss my cousin's engagement party. Family first, right? I could see her trying to decide whether to turn me away or let me in, but there were other family members within earshot, and it would have looked terrible for her to refuse entry to her own niece. so she stepped aside, and I walked into the party like I belonged there. The reactions were immediate and telling. Conversations stopped. People stared. My parents, who were standing near the kitchen, looked like they had seen a ghost. My brother, who had been laughing loudly with some cousins, went completely silent. But I acted like nothing was wrong. I hugged people, congratulated my cousin, complimented the decorations, and made small talk like everything was perfectly normal. I could feel the tension in the room, could see people whispering and exchanging glances, but I maintained my composure. After about an hour of socializing, I asked my cousin if I could say a few words to congratulate her. She looked uncomfortable, but couldn't refuse without seeming rude in front of all her guests. "Thank you so much," I said, raising my voice so everyone could hear. "I just want to share something with all of you, something that I think really shows the true meaning of family." At my cousin's engagement party, I stood up, connected my phone to the speaker, and started my presentation. As many of you know, I've always been the one in this family who tries to help when people are struggling. Over the past few years, I've given thousands of dollars to various family members to help with emergencies, bills, and unexpected expenses. I was happy to do it because I believed in taking care of family. I could see my parents trying to signal to each other, probably trying to figure out how to stop me, but I continued. But recently, I discovered something interesting about how my generosity was being received and what was happening when I wasn't around. I pulled out my phone and started displaying screenshots on the TV screen that I had connected to. Bank statements, loan documents, credit applications, all with my name and information, all connected to accounts I had never opened. It turns out that while I was willingly giving money to my family, some family members decided that I wasn't giving enough fast enough, so they took it upon themselves to take out loans and open credit cards in my name, without my knowledge and without my consent. The room was completely silent now. People were staring at the documents on the screen, trying to process what they were seeing. I clicked to the next slide, which showed a timeline of when each fraudulent account was opened, cross-referenced with when my family had started cutting me out of their lives. Interestingly, this identity theft began right around the time I started asking questions about where the money I was giving was actually going, and right before I was systematically excluded from family events and conversations. I looked directly at my mother, who was standing frozen by the kitchen counter, her face completely white. The beautiful irony is that they used my identity to steal more money from me than I had ever voluntarily given them, and then they cut me out of their lives because they thought I was being selfish with my money. My brother started to say something, but I held up my hand. "I'm not done. Let me show you some of the things that were purchased with the money stolen from my identity." I clicked to photos I had gathered from social media posts, my brother with his new car, my mother showing off her vacation photos, expensive purchases that had been made right after the fraudulent loans were approved. This car was purchased with an $18,000 loan taken out in my name. This vacation to Florida was funded by credit cards opened in my name. This jewelry was bought with money stolen from my identity. The silence in the room was deafening. Family members were looking at each other, trying to understand what they were hearing. Looking at my parents and brother with confusion and disgust. My mother collapsed into a chair, whispering, How did you find out?" Her voice was barely audible, but in the complete silence of the room, everyone heard her. That whispered question was as good as a confession. She wasn't denying what I had said. She wasn't claiming it was a misunderstanding. She was asking how I had discovered their scheme, which meant she knew exactly what I was talking about. My brother couldn't look at me. He was staring at the floor, his face red with shame and anger. "You didn't have to do this in front of everyone," he muttered. "Didn't I?" I asked, my voice getting louder. "You didn't have a problem spending my money in front of everyone. You didn't have a problem lying to everyone about why you could afford a new car. You didn't have a problem excluding me from family events while you were living off money you stole from me, but now that everyone knows the truth, suddenly you want privacy? My aunt, who had been so dismissive when I asked about being excluded from family events, was staring at my parents with disgust. "Is this true?" she asked my mother. "Did you really steal money from your own daughter?" My mother started crying, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of someone who had been caught and was feeling sorry for herself, not for what she had done. "You don't understand," she said through her tears. "We were desperate. We didn't know what else to do. The bills were piling up, and we thought—" "You thought you'd commit a felony against your own daughter rather than get jobs or ask for help honestly?" I interrupted. "You thought you'd destroy my credit score and put me $75,000 in debt rather than live within your means." My father, who had been silent up until this point, finally spoke up. "We always planned to pay it back," he said weakly. I laughed, and it wasn't a nice sound. "With what money, Dad? You couldn't pay your bills with the thousands of dollars I was giving you voluntarily. How were you going to pay back $75,000 plus interest? Or were you just planning to let me deal with that debt for the rest of my life?" People were starting to leave. I could see family members gathering their things, shaking their heads, avoiding eye contact with my parents. The party was over, and so was my family's reputation. My cousin, whose engagement party had turned into a crime confession, was crying. Not because she felt bad for my parents, but because she was embarrassed and hurt that this had happened at her special event. "I'm sorry your party was ruined," I said to her, "but I thought it was important for everyone to understand why I haven't been at family events lately. It wasn't because I didn't want to be here. It was because I was excluded for refusing to continue funding a family that was already stealing from me." For the first time in years, I chose myself. And the silence that followed? Peaceful. In the weeks after the engagement party, my phone was quiet. But this time it was a different kind of quiet. It wasn't the painful silence of being ignored and excluded. It was the calm silence of having cut toxic people out of my life. A few family members reached out to me, my grandmother, a couple of cousins who hadn't been involved in the financial abuse, an aunt who had always been kind to me. They were horrified by what my immediate family had done and wanted me to know that not everyone supported their actions. "I always wondered how your parents could afford some of the things they were buying," my grandmother told me during one of our phone calls. "It never made sense with what I knew about their income. I'm so sorry this happened to you, sweetheart." The legal process moved forward. The police investigation resulted in charges being filed against my mother and brother for identity theft and fraud. My father wasn't charged because there wasn't enough evidence that he had actively participated, but his silence and complicity spoke volumes about his character. My credit score, which had been destroyed by their fraudulent accounts, slowly started to recover as each account was disputed and removed from my credit report. The process took months, but eventually my financial reputation was restored. The money they had stolen was harder to recover. Some of it was gone, spent on vacations, cars, and luxuries that couldn't be returned. But the legal judgments against them meant that they would be paying me back for years to come, assuming they could find the income to make the payments. My brother lost his car. It was repossessed when the fraudulent loan was exposed. My mother had to return the jewelry and other items that could be traced to the stolen money. Their house went into foreclosure because they couldn't afford the payments without the influx of cash they had been stealing from me. The family that had been so quick to cut me out of their lives for refusing to give them money freely was now dealing with the consequences of taking it illegally. The family that had excluded me from gatherings and celebrations was now the subject of whispered conversations and disappointed looks at every family event. But the most satisfying part wasn't their legal troubles or financial consequences. It was the clarity that came from finally understanding who these people really were and choosing to build a life without them in it. I started going to therapy to work through the emotional trauma of being betrayed so deeply by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. It took time to trust people again, to believe that relationships could be genuine rather than transactional. I also started building relationships with the family members who had proven themselves to be trustworthy and genuine. My grandmother and I became much closer. I developed friendships with cousins I had barely known before. I learned that family isn't just about blood relations. It's about people who treat you with respect, honesty, and genuine care. The friends I had in my life stepped up in ways that my biological family never had. They supported me through the legal process, celebrated my victories, and helped me heal from the emotional damage. They showed me what real love and loyalty looked like. I also threw myself into my career and personal growth in ways I had never been able to do when I was constantly being drained by my family's financial emergencies. Without the burden of supporting multiple other households, I was able to save money, take vacations, invest in my future, and pursue interests I had been neglecting. For the first time in my adult life, my money was my own. My time was my own. My energy was my own. And I was using all of these resources to build a life that made me happy rather than to solve other people's problems. Looking back now, I realize that the betrayal was devastating, but it was also a gift. It showed me who my family really was. Beneath the surface of their blood is thicker than water rhetoric. It taught me that unconditional love isn't actually unconditional if it depends on your ability to solve people's problems and fund their lifestyle. It also taught me that sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones who know exactly how to exploit your kindness and generosity. My family knew I would do anything for them out of love, and they used that knowledge to manipulate and steal from me for years. But most importantly, it taught me that choosing yourself isn't selfish, setting boundaries isn't cruel, expecting honesty and respect in your relationships isn't asking too much, and sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away from people who don't value you, even if those people are your family. Family isn't always blood. It's the people who don't betray you. It's the people who celebrate your success without trying to take advantage of it. It's the people who love you for who you are, not for what you can give them. It's the people who would never dream of hurting you, even if they could get away with it. My real family now consists of people who have earned that title through their actions, not through shared genetics. And this family is smaller, but it's genuine. It's built on mutual respect and authentic love, rather than financial dependence and manipulation. The mother who screamed, "How did you find out?" at that engagement party isn't my family anymore. The brother who couldn't look at me when his crimes were exposed isn't my family anymore. The people who built their comfortable lifestyle on my stolen identity and broken trust aren't my family anymore. My family now consists of people who would never betray me, people who support my dreams without expecting payment, people who include me in their lives because they genuinely want me there, not because they need something from me. And you know what? This family is so much better than the one I was born into. This family celebrates my boundaries instead of trying to bulldoze through them. This family respects my success instead of exploiting it. This family loves me for who I am, not for what I can provide. If you're dealing with toxic family members who are taking advantage of your kindness, who are treating you like an ATM rather than a human being, who are making your love and generosity conditional on your ability to solve their problems, please know that you deserve better. You deserve people in your life who value you as a person, not as a resource. And sometimes, choosing yourself means letting go of people you've loved your entire life. It's painful, but it's also liberating. It's the beginning of building a life that's truly your own, surrounded by people who genuinely care about your well-being. The silence that followed my revenge wasn't empty. It was full of possibility, full of peace, full of the promise of better relationships and a better life. And that silence was worth everything I had to go through to achieve it.